Welcome to another edition of the Artist Bloc podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Schuler, and today's guest is a very phenomenal person. He is a poet, he's an educator, and just an all-around dope person. So, welcome to the show, Dasan Ahanu.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, okay.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here, and glad to be on the show.
Yes, appreciate you for coming. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking before about how we first met,
Right.
Which was at St. Aug.
Yeah.
That was my first teaching job when I got there. And my job there was I was in the film department. So that's what I was teaching. So I was doing my thesis during the time, and Al Strong did my soundtrack. This was before the article, though, before he is what he is today. I mean, he was doing his thing then, but you know what I'm saying? So, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And I feel like it was a group called Upright Lions, and they were performing at this little spot near State, and I feel like I saw you there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, cool.
Yeah. Me and the Upright Lions are like brothers, and so whenever they would come into town, especially anything in Raleigh, we often perform together, and definitely. Yep.
Yes. Okay. That's what's up. Because Artist Bloc wasn't in existence yet. We were like just talking about it, but we were still artists. So again, I had heard about you on campus, and you were the man on campus. So yeah. So I'm glad that we are having this moment to rekindle and reconnect.
Yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
yes,
Definitely.
yes.
Wow, it's a long time too.
It was a long time ago. Yes. So talk to me about a young Dasan and how you got into the arts and came to be what you are today.
By accident. It's kind of crazy because, for most of my life, art was not something that I thought about prominently. Writing was just, I grew up as an only child. I was my mother's only child. My dad had other kids, but they weren't together. So, and my mom's the oldest of her siblings. So I was like the oldest grandchild. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. I was rambunctious and mischievous and too smart for my own good. So writing and reading was a thing that I could do and occupy my time. If not, then there's no telling what I was going to get into. So the arts were just an outlet. And then I ended up being involved. I got moved into what they call an AG program or a magnet program in the second grade. And so I got introduced to literature and things like that a little bit more than you would in your regular English class because I was in the accelerated classes. And I wrote my first poem in second grade.
Okay.
It got put in the school newspaper. My mom was all excited.
What was it?
I don't remember. The only thing I remember is that I called whatever president at the time, I called him a billy goat. It was like a political commentary.
Okay.
I don't know why I felt, however I felt. I was that's one of the things about being the first kid around is that you're around adults of various ages.
Right.
There's no other kids. So I overheard something, wrote my little poem, and I think if that today, I don't know if anybody would have put that in the newspaper. It was a different time.
Yeah.
But as I got into high school, I went to Enloe High School in Raleigh, and they had a really, really strong arts program. Full auditorium theater. They did a lot of, musicals and things like that. And the city used that auditorium for a lot of talent shows and things. So I was too shy to do anything by myself. But if the homies were doing it, then I'm down. Sometimes that got me into trouble. But if the homies were doing it, I'm down.
Yeah.
And so I got exposed to, performing and things like that. But getting me to do anything by myself, never. So what happened was, I say all that to say is that when I went off to college, I partied too much. But folks found out that I wrote. It would try to invite me out. And I was at A&T.
Okay.
And so folks get down on campus, there was strong writing department. You had folks coming from all over the country. And I was like, I'm not reading nothing, nowhere in front of nobody. Y'all can stop asking me. And I parted myself back to the crib, which happens at T. And so my cousin, we're like brothers, found out that there was like this bohemian set that was happening, a monthly event called The Cypher. And he was like, let's go, because I heard the girls there dope. I'm like, cool. We get there, and of course, and we both were hip hop heads, and we're both with freestyle and all that. But I also wrote poetry, and so we're at this set where there's like music and poetry and what have you, and he's like telling people I write, and I'm like, bruh, stop.
Yeah.
I get it, what I'm saying? Because it's a dope thing to say when you walking up on like, hey, what's going on? How you doing? My boy, right? But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, let's not do this too much.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, said it enough that somebody was like, well, you know, the same folks that do this do a weekly open mic. And I'm like, oh, damn. So he's like, cool, we coming through. And I'm like, no, we ain't. He's like, yeah, we are. Because it was true.
Yeah.
The women were amazing.
Yeah.
So he's like, we coming through the open mic. We go to the open mic. The host is someone I grew up with. So he's like, oh, word, you right? I'm like, my cousin is like, yeah, he do. He's like, cool, we're gonna get you on the mic, right? And I'm like, nah. He's like, yeah. Next couple of weeks, he's like, we're gonna get you on the mic, right? He's like, I'm not gonna let you not read. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna read. And that's where everything started. Cause I'm like, I gotta read. I'm not getting ready to sign my real name on the, I don't want to be called. I'm like, do I want to be called up by my regular name? No. I'm like, do I want to be called up by any one of the hip rap names I use? No. And so that's where Dasan Ahanu came from. I read my first poem ever publicly there. It was a set called Expressions in downtown Raleigh. And I just got the bug. Like immediately from the time I got off stage, I got the bug. And then I finally, if you did well enough, you could get a shot at performing at the monthly event. But you had to get there because the list was short because they did featured performances, after party, the whole nine, live band show, DJ. And I got the last slot one month before you go to the party. I walk up, the host is like, man, look, you might want to go ahead and make this quick because folks is ready for the party. So I get up, I do my poem, no confidence, whatever. And I had another one of my homeboys who's an MC, another artist, and he was like, I got off stage, he cussed me out.
What?
He was like, bro, don't you ever do that no more. And what he said, the thing that stuck was after he cussed me out, he was like, don't ever get on stage and give them a reason not to hear you. And so I just got hungry and I just started hitting the mic as much as possible. Anywhere I heard about things. Chapel Hill, I started trekking back down to Greensboro, making connections with folks that I knew up this way, just trying to get my chops up, and fell in love.
I have so many questions from that. For what? So you from Raleigh, born and raised.
Yep.
That is so interesting. I'm from Garner, and I tried to go to ILO. They denied me. So I went to Garner Senior High, but it's all good. You know what I'm saying? And I went to A&T. I didn't know you went there.
Yep. But
I went to A&T. So, because I know you said you had your little situation with A&T. Did you end up going back to A&T or did you go somewhere else?
I ended up going to St. Aug.
Oh.
So that was how my connection to St. Aug. So the reason why I ended up teaching was I got one of the English professors there when I went back to school. When I went back to school, because I got laid off from my job. And my job, it was paying for me to traipse around up and down the East Coast to go do poems because I had a pretty good job at the time. But I didn't have a degree. So when they laid everybody off, I was working with a staffing company and they were like, you don't have a degree, so we can't get you this money again because the market is. And I was like, well, I'm going to get a degree again. My young stuff and stuff. I'm like, fine, I'll go get a degree. And I had my grandfather and my aunt both were St. Aug alums. So I went over there, looked at one of their programs, and I went to St. Aug. The English professor knew me from community work. She's a big, mentor of mine, but a big hippie. And so she was heavily involved in community work. And she got the idea, she ended up becoming chair, and she got the idea to pitch a residency. And asked me to come over and meet with some folks and help make the pitch. And I didn't know if it was going to happen. And I was working with a nonprofit in Raleigh. They had a job they were trying to offer me. And right before I was getting ready to take it, I got the call that they approved it. And so that's how I ended up at St. Aug. They approved the residency, and that's how I ended up teaching there. But I had already found the arts. And so that's what I did to help me pay bills while I went back to school because I needed it to be flexible so I could take classes. So I worked with arts organizations and I did workshops and working with kids. I had a background working with kids, so I did art programs for kids. By the time I got my degree, the arts community was already like wrapping their arms around me. So that last job I had with that nonprofit before I got the call for the residency was my last attempt for corporate America or anything. Cause I was I was looking, I went to A&T to be an engineer, but I ended up graduating with an organizational management degree.
Wow.
And was working in project supervision at IBM and was looking at project management. I had background. I'd been an executive, a lot of odd jobs. I'd been an executive assistant and all these things. So corporate America and management was where my mind was. And then God was like, well, before you go do that, and I got the phone call and I had a choice. And actually, St. Aug was less money, but something said, take that. And everything shifted. So it became arts. And then St. Aug is what convinced me to go get my master's so I could keep teaching. And then gave me a shot to be a full professor. To be a full-time professor. So, but yeah, that all was community because I was headed in a different direction.
Wow. Where'd you get your master's from?
University of Denver. That same cousin, it's so funny. It's funny how our lives intertwine. He ended up coming. He was at State, and we both partied our way out of school. Okay. So we both went to St. Aug, and got our undergraduate degrees, and then he went and got a MFA. Not an MBA. And he was also on the project management, management track. He stayed in it. I got pulled into the arts, and so he got a job. They sent him to Michigan first, and then he ended up in Denver. And because we're like two peas in a pod, I'm out in Denver hanging out and found out about University of Denver. And I'm like, well, this is crazy. He's like, move out here, bro. Like, come on, just come out here. I'm like, well, okay. So I looked at UD because they had like one of the top creative writing programs. Wow. But it's a PhD. It's a PhD program. I was like, I don't know about that. I've been running from a PhD for years now. So I was like, I went in their continuing education program. They had arts degrees, and it was arts management, or you could get a degree in art culture that was writing focused, and you could choose your disciplines. And I was like, cool, and you could do it on campus or online. So I'm like, well, I can start taking classes now, and then when I decide to move, there won't be a disruption to the program. Right. So I told him that, and he was like, word, like, yeah, as long as you coming out here, cool. Yeah. So I went over there to the school, met with some folks, signed up for the program, and I didn't move, but I could finish the program from here. Yeah. So it was a great program. Concentration was in creative writing, focused on poetry and short fiction, and finished my master's there. Wow. Yeah.
That's so interesting because what you're telling the story, how you say you weren't intentionally trying to get into the arts, but it's like your life kept pulling you in that particular direction. I want to bring it back a little bit because you said you loved hip hop, and I guess you were battling between being an MC and a poet when you were initially writing, or did you always know that you wanted to be a poet and the MCing was a side thing?
That's a really good question. So I grew up really shy. And it's so funny because the friends I grew up with don't believe it. And the reason why is because I was always around, but I really didn't talk much. Like I was really introverted. I'm still introverted, but I was really shy and introverted, but I was always around. And like I said, if the homies was doing it, I'm there, for better or for worse. But poetry was like my way of processing my emotions. Hip hop was how I found, sort of my own, way, and so it was my way of thinking, my way of looking at the world, my way of being with the homies. And so it was like hip hop was my outward expression and poetry was my inward reflection, like my inward way to think. So as I got older, I would only rhyme, like I only did that around the homies. Like we'd sit and cipher and what have you. But it was nothing I thought about doing publicly. Never had recorded anything or anything. What took me back to hip hop was poetry. Because when I got on stage and started spitting poetry, and I started going around and finding shows, I was just searching for a mic. And so in order to get on the mic, like there was a bunch of hip hop sets at open mics. And so it took me back and it gave me a reason to get back on stage. Yeah. And so I went from there. It's like, okay, I'm spitting these poems and, it's a mix of poetry and Southern storytelling and Southern preaching and hip hop. And then from there, I'm like, well, I also rhyme too. And so I got more comfortable being out on the hip hop scene because of the poetry. And that's how I got known. Like, oh, yeah, it's the poet. And so so I could go out and jump in ciphers and do what have you. And like, there was never any problem. And so they would just got used, all the MCs in the area just got used to always seeing me at the hip hop shows. And from there, I started throwing shows. I started hosting shows. And that's how I kind of made my way on the hip hop scene as well. But yeah, it's crazy. It's kind of crazy because, when I left high school, like the any type of performance or anything, I left that in high school and got back to it because of poetry. And so once poetry opened that door, everything else, performance wise, acting, everything came as a result of the poetry.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that with MCs, they are poets, to a certain degree. Like, it's a fine line. How would you define the difference between like a poet and an MC? I mean, I feel like people associate poets with like, it's no beat and they're just doing their thing. But I mean, technically when you're rhyming, it's similar to that. So how would you define that?
It's a lot more room.
With poetry? With
poetry. So poetry gives you a lot more room to work with. And I'm saying that to say that MC ties both worlds together. The title MC. Because the MC is an orator and a performer and a showman, which both, you can do that rhyming or you can do that spitting poetry. That bridges both worlds. Rapping and poetry and spoken word have different homes.
Okay.
Because when you're rapping, the rhythm, the measure, like the beat and the musicality of it, all of that drives what you do. Your job is to be distinct on that beat, whether you blend in or on beat, off time, whatever you're doing, that's your playground. With poetry, we set our own rhythm, our own pace, our own tone. So people's minds are our playground, right? So our effectiveness is about how we bring that to life on stage and on a mic. And that's where the worlds are bridged, which is why you see folks going back and forth. Even if they, you get hated on, rappers always say that if you can't rap, you end up being a poet. And then, so there's this thing, but being an MC is what brings it together. And so what you end up seeing is you see hip hop heads living in both worlds. And going back and forth. You'll see a lot of MCs will say they started out writing poetry because you get to play with language in a way that sharpens your sword, so that when you get on the beat, what you're able to, your mindset and your approach is different. You just got to figure out how to live on that beat because you don't have the same room. And then if you're going the other way, there's lots of MCs who come through the open mic and spit stuff a cappella. And if the content is there, they got the crowd in the midst of their hands because they know what, they know where to inflect. They know where to drop the punch. You let it breathe a little bit, like them learning how to operate in that room. Once they figure that out, they know how to take the crowd with them.
Yeah.
So that's the real thing. I mean, I've always felt like the MC is a mix of both and lives in both places and is the bridge, is like the portal between both worlds.
Yeah.
But each place has a different home. And so I know that with spoken word, I have more room.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do see a lot of poets who make like albums with music, but sometimes if they make an album with music, sometimes they're just saying poetry over the music as opposed to like rapping over the music, because it's like a difference, you know what I mean? Yes. Okay. So I wanted to bring it back too, because I thought it was so unique that you had jobs in the arts, like you were aware to go and do that because you knew, like, I guess once you got that taste and that bug, you knew you want to be in that world forever. What made you want to get a job in the arts versus just continue to try to be just a performer?
I wanted to stay here.
Yeah.
as I started to because at first it was just, it was cool to do, it was fun to do. I was able to express myself and just kind of, just share my thoughts. But when I got pushed to dedicate myself to the craft, and putting those hours in the lab and in the gym in, folks started telling me, okay, well, it's time to move. Where you going? New York, LA, Atlanta, DC and I thought about it and contemplated, but I didn't want to leave here.
Why didn't you want to leave?
Because I'm the kind of person that likes sanctuary. Like, I like to go wherever things are. And then when that's done, I want to leave it there. And I want to know where it is so I can go visit y'all again. But and I can do that here. New York, I'm just like, there's no peace. Everything's at a certain pace.
Yeah.
And just knowing I can go home to my apartment or whatever, that's not sanctuary. That's a break. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a different thing. LA, I just had no concept of, I'd never been out there. And when I finally got a chance to go out there, I'm like, this is just like this. If I now know it's not. LA folks would be like, you went to all the typical parts of LA, but it felt just like TV. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I was this close to moving to DC. Okay. That was going to be my compromise. First it was DC. And then there was a brief moment where I contemplated Brooklyn, because I found Long Island and then Manhattan first. When I found Brooklyn, I was like, hold up.
Yeah.
Maybe this.
Yeah.
But when I weighed it all out, like New York, that's the cost of everything. Yeah. It's just so much. So DC was going to be my compromise. A lot of people love Atlanta, but it never pulled on my heart like that.
Because I was about to say that. What about Atlanta?
It never pulled on my heart like that. And probably because my first trips to Atlanta, I felt the interactions I had felt too intentional.
What do you mean by that?
It felt like folks were on, like just on, like they were just, like, if I got to be on all the time, that doesn't fit my personality. Like, I'm a true Southern boy. Like, I'm not going to be on for y'all all day, all night. Like, I don't want to, if I'm going to go eat, I don't want to be on in case I bump into one of y'all. Like, I don't want to do that thing.
Yeah.
That felt very New York to me.
I got that.
Even though it was Atlanta. And I'm like, well, if that's what this is, I'm not doing this either.
Yeah.
DC was a little different because folks, that DC moves very quickly, but folks don't really, they don't really care. You know what I'm saying? The only thing I couldn't deal with DC was I had an aunt who was just like, you've got to maneuver in a certain way, like how you maneuver and where you maneuver, like appearances and connections and networks matter a lot around here. And once again, I'm a Southern boy. I'm like, do I want to do all that dancing? So the thing was, for me, was like, if I can stay here, then I can do all of that, but I only have to do it for so long and then I come back home.
I got that.
So in my mind, I was like, I would like to be based here or somewhere. Like, now, the reason why I almost wanted to move to Denver was Denver has it's like if you took Charlotte, Greensboro, and the Triangle and blended them together, that's what Denver feels like.
Really?
Like, you've got professional sports teams. It's really spread out and sparse, so it doesn't feel like over like there's buildings and stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
There's still a little bit of rural. There's still city. It has all the things, all of the features, and a variety of people. It's especially a lot of Latino and Hispanic folks, and a lot of culture, because there's so many different types of folks.
Right.
So lots of underground spots, a lot of little hidden things. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can live over here and drive a little bit away from stuff and kind of have my little moment. And I can get in the car and drive here, drive there. And I can have whatever experience I want. I can go to Aurora, and it's hella black. I could go over here. And then there's banking, there's finance, there's all of the concert venues and all that. And I was like, okay, so I can get this.
Yeah.
But that's why. And so, but that's what made me want to stay here. I just wanted to be based here and see if I could figure out how to see the rest of the country and then ultimately see the rest of the world, but come back home here.
Yeah. Did you figure that out?
I mean, I'm still here.
Yeah.
It's funny because that's specific to me. I'm not big on touring. And so that's really how I've done it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I leave here and go wherever, the arts is how I've seen the country. Like I didn't grow up in a family that took a bunch of family trips. Like I've seen the country as an artist,
Mm-hmm.
and it's taken me across the country and continues to do so. So I go wherever I go,
Mm-hmm.
do whatever I do, hang out, meet some people, see the city, and I come home.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I've done it.
Yeah.
And it feels good for me.
Yeah.
And so for me to leave here, I'd have to be leaving here to go somewhere where I can continue to do the same thing.
I got you. I feel that. I like peace too. And I lived in New York for a short period of time in my life. I also lived in the DC area where I was really mostly in PG for 7 years because I went to Howard to get my master's.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally understand that of having to be like aware and on point and, aware who you're talking to, who you're not talking to because you don't even need to talk to them type of thing. You know what I mean? So I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I was like, I started becoming homesick towards the end because I missed that piece of North Carolina. It's just, I don't know. And maybe because I was born and raised here too, it's just different from anywhere else in the world, and it's very like serene and peaceful for me. You know what I mean?
But the difficult about that, the hard part of that is that, which I know for a lot of artists around here is very difficult, is opportunities are not as prevalent and obvious here.
That is true.
And so if I was going to be here, then my options were to kind of try to build a buzz here as an artist, to get someone's attention, not here, for me to, to get on and get put on. And, I tried that for a little bit and thought I was close one time, I was working with an indie label and that didn't work out. And so I learned, I'm like, well, I want to be here and I want to keep creating. There's only so many places for me to place me and my art here. I need to be active because you've got to sustain yourself. You got to stay in it to be in it.
Right.
And I need to stay active to get gigs or for my reputation to build or for anybody to want, but I also got to pay bills.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, let's learn how all this works. But I started out performing and then I got asked to do workshops. And because I had a background of working with kids, I'm like, well, I'll figure curriculum out. Then I got into higher ed and I'm like, okay, well, I see what this is. And then it's like, I started doing shows and learning how to curate and put shows together. So then I'm like, okay, so then how do you develop programs? And so, the community gave me a chance to think about how to develop programs. And so I got into program development. But I also come from project supervision. So I understand like logistics and processes and procedures and things like this. So it's just transferring skills and blending skills. And then just equipping myself along the way. And a lot of, oh yeah, I can do that. Whether I knew how to do it, like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, okay. And so that's how I've been able to sustain. It's like each opportunity, as long as I'm focused on it, and if I do pretty good, ends up leading to another opportunity.
Right.
And then leaving out of that, I can't just leave it with the experience. I need to leave each opportunity with at least a new skill.
I like that.
Right.
I like that.
And so I'd get a job and I'm always like, okay, I know what I'm doing, but what else can I help out with? Because I'm leaving this job with a new skill. And that skill is how I'm getting the next job. So I'd get to the next job and be like, can you do this? I'd be like, yeah. Now, mind you, I don't have any experience in it.
Yeah.
But I got the last job to let me do it because I had extra time on my hands. So I'm like, yeah, I know how to do that. And so then I do that. And then I'm like, okay, so is there anything else you need help with? And I'd get an extra dollar in my paycheck with the next job.
Yeah.
And I work through temp agencies and I'm like, I increase my typing. I like, what I'm saying? Like that's how I maneuvered. And so it's like, and so that's my mindset. My mindset is always every experience, not just leaving every opportunity I get, I'm not leaving with the experience, I'm leaving with a new skill. And so that's how I've been able to buy more time as an artist here. Is to be able to learn the industry.
Yeah.
And learn performing arts and learn theater and learn festivals and learn that from the inside so that, I can afford to keep making and creating and afford to be able to take, but also to make connections that
Mhm.
lead to me having a chance to go perform at this or perform at that. And so that's what I've done.
Yeah, and that was gonna lead into my next question because I feel like you have built your own platform.
Mhm.
Like you're not necessarily following any group, and maybe you could, but it just seems like you built your own platform. You have a great reputation throughout the state. Because I was in Raleigh when I heard of you, and I'm in Greensboro, and I hear about you, you know, and other places, Durham, you know. That was the intention, was to build that platform.
It was,
Yeah.
and you know,
because you didn't have the ability to have the opportunities here, but you would have had it other places.
No,
Right.
I didn't. And what's funny is that there is actually more going on than you would think. But we're down south, so if you don't know someone, you don't know what opportunities there are. Like it's still very word of mouth and connection oriented.
Right.
So at that time, I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I started being out and active enough that my name started to get further than I did. And then people started reaching out because I'm always out and about, so I'm easy to find. And so I started getting offered opportunities. I'm like, well, I didn't even know this was going on.
Right.
And I'm asking my peers and they didn't know either.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but I get there and there might be other artists there. And I'm like, I don't ever see y'all. So how did y'all even find out that this exists? Like, where y'all come from and where did this come from?
Right.
And then I'm like, well, there's different levels, you know, and there's different opportunities and but which is a very Southern thing.
Right.
You know, like somebody got access to some resources and they called who they knew. And they don't know the rest of us. And so they didn't call us.
Right.
And depending on what that person looks like, they ain't calling us.
Yeah.
Because they ain't gonna never be where we are.
Right.
So it wasn't until I got to a place of starting to be in some of those spaces, I'm like, there's more here. So then that made me even more curious. I'm like, well then how do I know what's going on? And so I'm like, what are the organizations that have opportunities to offer? Who's here across the state, who's working in the arts? You know, who's sending artists into these classrooms? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? And I just started being really curious about it and hunting and digging.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is what it means for me to survive here. This is what also I'm like, well, if I'm gonna do anything, like how can I help folks? Because I come, you know what I'm saying, like my elders grabbed me early when I was as an artist. And when you think about social justice and community and equity and building capacity, like there's all kinds of young talent out here. How do I make this work? Like who else can I bring along? Like who else can come through with me? And it's still a very business mindset. It's like, I just need y'all to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I just need y'all to come through, show up and show out. Because then I'll get a call again and I can put some money in my pocket and then put some money in y'all pocket.
Right.
We can build this reputation together. And then y'all can see this and then they can come back and ask y'all, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like a spider web. Like, let's just, you know?
Yeah.
But not everybody, I realized that seems real idealistic to a lot of people and not as many people were on board as I thought they would be.
Right.
So you learned
I wanted to say something very quickly. What you just said that I feel like is key is that you were actively searching for organizations and you were actively yourself doing things. And I think a lot of times people are sitting still wanting things to come to them. In all actuality, it really doesn't work like that. Even if you were in a bigger market, you still have to actively go out and do things. So,
and you know, mind you, like I said, I actually, you know, I have a very public career, but I'm really introverted and I have social anxiety. So like, I'm not a social butterfly, but being present, like being out and active gives me a reason to interact. I love people, you know, but I can only do it for so long.
I feel you.
But I'm curious and I love to be places and I love meeting different people and having, like, I love having great random conversations. Like I just enjoy it. But if you're a social person, then I don't understand why you're not out and about. Now I do get it. It's a sacrifice. Like I spend a lot of money to be out, to build the career, to build the reputation that I have. A lot of gas money, a lot of entrance fees, a lot of whatever to be out places, to bump into someone, for them to be like, I think I seen you, you know, you be at all the joints. And I'm like, yeah, you know, who are you? What are you? Like, you're a poet. Well, you know, and well, you know, I don't know too many poets, but I got this thing, or do you teach? Or like, well, I work at this youth program, like, you know, that kind of thing. To then put myself, you know, in a position to get an opportunity. Because in every room is a possible opportunity. It's just how do you get to it? So it's not easy. And sometimes you can feel like you're not making headway. But I'm here, so I have no choice but to play a long game. You know?
Yeah.
It's either play a long game, or you have three options. You play a long game, you can pick something and throw all your energy and all your effort into it and hope it works out, or you can leave. And even though I'm an MC and, you know, and I'm in hip hop, I'm also a poet. Ain't no, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think I've been close a couple times, but I'm not enticing. Ain't no D-boys showing up, you know what I'm saying? To kind of like, you know, help spur my career. Like, that's not lucrative enough attraction.
Right.
There's no major industry. Like, there ain't no red carpet dreams, you know, for the messages I deliver. So that wasn't gonna happen.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Trust me, I was looking like, yo, any of the homies, any of y'all from around the way? Any of y'all want to come fund this? No, none of y'all? Okay.
Yeah.
We love you, dog. We appreciate what you do. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
I that's great. Anybody want to put some money on it?
Right.
So yeah, so it's so I think that's hard. But you're right. Like, there's work to do beyond just creating your art to be able to make it in a market that's not popping.
Yeah.
You know? And it is not for lack of talent. Like, there's amazing talent. We have award-winning artists from all different kinds of parts of North Carolina every year. At Grammy, Emmys, there's always somebody here winning something.
Yeah.
But a lot of the recognition that folks are getting is from outside of the state, because there's not any major industries based here.
Right.
So you have to, once again, I was talking to a student, and I'm like, you have to survive to make it, which means you have to sustain to survive. If you don't survive, you're never going to make it. If it's going to take 6 years for you to blow and you could only make it 3, it's not that you never blew. You just didn't survive long enough to blow.
Right. Right.
So I don't know. I may win an award when I'm 60, you know, but I'm going to be making art until I'm 60.
Right.
I may never, but I'm going to make art till I croak.
Right.
And I'll have my impact, and I'll have, you know, lived my life and done as much as I could, and mentored a lot of folks, and, you know, made some money, lost some money, but ain't no possibility for anything to ever pop, blow, for me to win anything to happen if I'm not active.
Right.
And I refuse to not be active.
Right. I got 2 questions. They're kind of like separate but connected from what you just said. For one, you keep describing things as opportunities. And I want you to break that down, because every opportunity brings you a different form of compensation. That's not necessarily money. Sometimes it's coming in different ways. How are you distinguishing an opportunity that you should take versus an opportunity that you need to pass up?
That's a good question. I'm probably a cautionary tale, because I took on anything I could. And not out of desperation, but the driving force for me was, I was like, I didn't feel like I knew enough. And the only way to know enough is for me to gain as much experience as possible. So like, I said yes to a lot, but I did not say yes to a lot of the same things.
Gotcha.
There are folks who probably would not have taken some of the opportunities I took, because some of them I made money, some of them I didn't make much money at all, some of them cost me money. But I saw the value in having a wide variety of experiences and being in a variety of different places, seeing things from a variety of different perspectives, because I'm thinking about both who I can meet and connect with, and I'm thinking about myself, my art, and my trajectory. So for my art, if I'm in a variety of different places, I got to figure out, what can I bring to these spaces? And I'm not forcing myself into a space, and I'm not conforming for a space. So that means I got to go back to the lab. So how do I build my repertoire that I can maneuver and like connect in these spaces. Me personally, like I'm not a salesman, so I need to be present to see what's going on, both in terms of placing myself in front of these different people, because I'm here and I need seeds planted wherever. But also for my trajectory, the more I see, the more I have at my disposal to think about how I'm going to move for the future. Like I now have a wider and a deeper view of what's going on around here.
Right.
You know, so now, for instance, I used to have conversations about space is always a problem. And so when I talk to arts councils and things like that, I'm like, when you're doing professional development, telling people how to write for grants and things like that, that's beautiful. You're telling people how to go after resources. And you can encourage their craft. That's cool. So if I got a couple dollars and I have a beautiful piece to present, where am I presenting it? You help me get money and you help me get deeper into my craft. I went some workshops and I have this work. What am I doing with it? What you haven't taught me is to go out into my city and realize there is no space in my city perfect for what I want to do. So how am I able to walk into a space, walk into a restaurant, walk into a bar, walk into a gallery and envision what this could be? How can we transform this space? How can I have that conversation so I can put this art up somewhere? There is no course that doesn't get taught.
Right.
In your major cities, that gets mentored. You know, curators and exhibitors, that's an apprentice. Like you learn under someone and your experiences tell you how to shape how you learn to create these experiences. You know, festivals, there's a person who tried it out and then brings people under them and you learn how to run a festival being in the midst of how a festival runs. So I'm like, if I'm out and about, then I'm seeing what people are doing. So then I can figure out, okay, so how can I flip that for my folks and what I do? You know, okay, I'm over here. Okay, well then how can I black this out? Okay, I see what y'all are doing. Okay, what if I, you know, so because I gotta kill what I eat.
Right.
So if there's 3 venues and everybody's trying to use them, where else am I going? You know what? But I was over here. I was over there. I was curious, and I heard about this thing, and they did it in the back room of a barbecue shack.
Yeah.
I'm in there like, oh, cool. Well, I know somebody that's got a restaurant. Can I do something in the back? What you gonna do in here? Look, let me show you. Let me tell you how I'm gonna do it. Let's see what we're gonna do. Oh, word. Well, if that's what you want to do. Well, matter of fact, you can get it. You can get it for free. Word. So let me throw my. You know what I'm saying? I need to know how to maneuver.
Yeah.
If I don't know how to maneuver, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna be stuck.
Yeah. It's about creating that and being able to visualize and create that platform. But if you don't see it, you're not gonna know what to do it. Which is leading me to the next part, which I feel like you're hinting at it. Because you said it earlier in terms of it's not necessarily an industry here. Because I had a guy on DJ Carolina. Have you heard of DJ Carolina before? We were talking about how North Carolina doesn't have like a distinctive sound. Like when you hear a record from an artist from North Carolina, you don't necessarily be like, oh, that's North Carolina. You just like, that's a dope artist, you know? So I feel like when you just talked about how it's not necessarily an industry here, do you feel like North Carolina can sustain an industry? Do you feel like North Carolina wants an industry? Or do you feel like North Carolina likes being North Carolina?
I think they want an industry. I don't think they know. I don't think North Carolina knows what they want it to be, because what's happening, and it's the same thing with the sound. North Carolina has a rich, long-standing musical arts tradition. There's so many legends that are from here. Problem is that it's legends from across genres. You know, and it's such a transplant. This is like, you know, you used to call it the Middle East. Like if you're going further down south, like so many people have roots and ties in North Carolina for some period of time. You've got military folks down east. You know, somebody's mama, daddy spent time here because of military. You've got folks relocating here for the Research Triangle Park. Or if you engineer, you might end up this way. For years, tobacco, what have you might end up in Winston. If it's finance, you might end up in, there's so many different reasons for people to be here for however long. There's so many influences. and there have been for years. So it's really eclectic. The problem is we're Southern. Like we have yet to get to the place. We're not like Cali. Like we're not like Cali. We're not one of those places that has accepted being eclectic.
That's interesting that you say that. Okay, keep going.
We haven't come to that realization and made that a thing.
Yeah.
So what happens is I don't think we know what kind of scene we want. You know, because there's, you know, because we're not DC, we're not New York, we're not like we are truly a hodgepodge, and it's blues, it's jazz, it's rock, it's folk. Like we had Grammy and Emmy Award winners across the board, Latin. You know what I'm saying? Like we've had all of that here, and we have we have indigenous artists. You know, we have a lot of traditional music and culture happening here. But if we ever decided to be, I feel like that it would feel really awkward if we ever embraced our eclecticness, because it doesn't seem like it fits in the South.
Okay, I can see that, what you just said.
But I think that's what we are. And if we ever embraced it, then we could actually build a sustainable scene. Because you also have people who are transplanted here from all over. And if you do that, everybody's going to find something that's familiar to them.
Right.
The New York heads are going to find that. Your DC heads are going to find that. Your Midwest heads are going to, because all of it's here.
Right.
And all of those things have somebody that's made it there that has ties here, because their family migrated from here to there. You know, so we've got all of that here. We've got, you know, if you're from the West, you're going to find that vibe here. It's here.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I think that's the problem. So if that's the case, what that does is it puts pressure for folks to experiment more. I can't tell you who's going to show up for what. Like I've literally, over the years I've thrown shows, I've had different people show up. We got to a point we started asking people, how'd you find out about this? And no matter how much promo or ads or whatever, folks be like, word of mouth. We do the Poetry Slam every month. There'd be a whole year where a half to 2/3 of the crowd is different every month. And we're like, man, it'd be crazy if any of the returners came back. But I'm like, and it never happens.
Yeah.
What happens is there's, depending on what's going on, there's a different set of folks who hear about it. And it's like, let's go try that this time. Like that's what we have around it. So the only way you can win is to be in a place where you can do a variety of things.
Yeah.
Or place yourself in a variety of spaces, because you never know what audience you're going to grab.
Right.
If you're like, nah, I'm going to do this thing, then okay, cool. You can do that thing every time out, as long as you understand that there's going to be a point in time where folks are going to be like, I don't want to do that right now. I want to go do this. And if you can take that L, because they may all show up next month,
right?
Them and some more,
right?
Or they may show up 2 months later. Can you take 2 months of L's? I can't.
No, I don't want to.
So then how do you, so collaboration, different, where can you place your art? What type of, like, what can you do? Like what kind of different kinds of things can you throw? This is my experience. I mean, there are folks who stay true to what they do and kind of figure it out. But like from my experience, this is what I saw. And so that's how I had to think business wise. But yeah, I feel like that we have not gotten to a place where we're ready to say like, no, like we're eclectic as hell over here.
Yeah. It makes sense. What you just said makes total sense. Because it made me think about even like Chapel Hill, how different they are there versus Durham, how different it is there versus Raleigh, how different it is there, you know, versus here, versus Winston, which is 20 minutes away. So yeah, that got my brain going. I like that.
I mean, when you think about, even hip hop, like I love Moray, and I some of my homies were talking about him, and I listened to the song, and I was like, oh great, what? And I went hunting. What's so crazy about that is that when you listen to him and he's from Fayetteville, when you listen to what's on the radio now, you'll go, oh, okay, I get it, because it sounds in that vein. Problem is, they ain't nobody else. Like the only other person, street oriented or whatever, on the radio from North Carolina is the baby. And the baby does not sound like Moray.
Not at all.
And one's on one side of the state and one's from the other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they sound like they fit when you listen to the radio, but the rest of those folks are from all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
You've got two artists from here and neither one of them sound the same. That's what North Carolina is.
Right.
If you throw Cole or Rhapsody into the mix, it keeps getting more disparate and more diverse.
Right.
If you keep going and you look at Luke Nasty and you keep if you keep looking at who's blown, none of them sound the same, but they're all from here.
Yeah.
And so like, if you think about the shows, like here at the Artist Bloc, there may be 6, 7 artists, none of them sound the same.
Yeah.
And they all live in the city.
Yeah.
So, but that's just where we are.
Yeah.
And when you see talent shine, like really real talent, like there's gonna always be folks who are just doing whatever's hot. That's always gonna happen. That's always the case. It happens in poetry. But in terms of real, art, like they're different. They're all different, and that's always what it's been.
Yeah.
And so that's what I feel we are.
Yeah. I feel we are too. Now that you're breaking it down, you know. So we got to the portion of the show, which is the important part. We talk about the 5 steps for a person to get into this game. In particular, in your ride as a poet or MC. So go ahead and let the people know what are the 5 steps you would say to get into this game.
So the first thing is feed yourself. Last Poets, I never forget. Last Poet said that you can't, like, how are you going to feed the people if you don't feed yourself? And so, I say I like that because it doesn't. You can read, you can converse, you can listen. Like however you want to get information, you got to keep learning. You got to keep feeding yourself. You got to keep studying. You got to keep. And that's why for me, opportunities. Like I'm the kind of learner. I like to put my hands on things. So for me to go somewhere and experience something, I learn a lot from it. I'm a hyperactive, short attention span person, so I can't always sit and read for hours. But I'll listen to something and I'll Google for hours, or I'll go listen to a talk, or or just go sit in the coffee shop and but feed yourself. That's number one. Number 2 is always look for opportunities to improve your craft. And I'm notorious for looking across disciplines. My students know that. Like I'll go watch a painter and I'm watching, them paint, and I'm like, there's a writing exercise in this. Or I'm listening to a business, like I go to a business lecture and I'm listening to them talk about concepts, and I'm like, there's a way for me to think about artists. I sit and watch folks talk about, I'll watch something about something Rock Nation does, and I'm like, well, I know how to do this event. I ain't got Rock Nation money, but it's watching them put it together. I'm like, ooh, I can do this thing at the spot down the street and pull these concepts together. So always look for ways to hone your craft. So that's the second thing. Third thing is always, think about different ways to place, different places to place your craft.
Okay.
And that includes grants. Grants are a different way to place your craft. Fellowships are a different way to place your craft. Different organizations. I used to always talk to artists like, there's a number of conferences that happen. They're themed. There are a lot of interest organizations that are around a particular interest. Do you have work that fits that? Is there a are you Greek? I had a young cat that he was, he started it before he left college, but left out of college in his fraternal organization. He wasn't even Divine Nine, like he was at a PWI, but his fraternity got him gigs all over the country. He was able to tour off of that and build a following. He was just smart enough to recognize, like, I have this network. So all of those are just thinking about where can I place my art. Most Def did that gallery experience, and it's wild that so many artists have to get to a certain point. And I understand it, because if you get to a certain level, a certain recognition, then galleries are asking you. But there are galleries in your city. Like there are ways, like they're just so, like you can, it's hard for you to place art that's not visual art in the gallery, but visual artists.
Right.
So is there someone who has art or photographs that can match the music or match the poems? If so, then now you have an exhibit. Right?
Right.
That exhibit can run for a couple of days. You can help sell the art, and you can build an audience for you and your music. But now it's an exhibit. But we don't think about that, because fine art is not something that's accessible to everyone. So if we haven't experienced it, we don't see this. But I'd go and see abstract, like I would just, because I'm curious, I would go see some of the weirdest stuff, and folks, oh my God, this is amazing. Really?
Yeah.
This is amazing? Because I don't know what the hell's going on in here.
Yeah.
But y'all all showed up for it. And what it looked like is they just threw some stuff together and gave it a good explanation. And y'all like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I know people that are really dope that why don't, so look for ways to place your art. So that's 3. 4, is resist the anger and frustration.
Why you say that?
Because it's not going to be easy. So there's a lot of things you got to deal with. You may not get love at home. You may get love elsewhere before you get love at home.
Yeah.
You can't walk around with that madness and frustration. You can't walk around with that anger.
Yeah.
There may be folks who get props before you do.
Yeah.
You can't walk around with that anger of being passed over. You can't, your friends and your family may not show up for none of your stuff.
Yeah.
You can't walk around with that. Like there's a whole nother group of people waiting for you and waiting for your art. And none of your folks may ever show up for nothing you do.
Yeah.
They don't mean they don't love you, but there's also still an audience for, like, that's not your audience.
Right. That's not your audience.
That's not your audience. So stop waiting for them to show up. Even your homies, stop waiting for them.
Yeah.
If they weren't going to stuff like this before, and they may go see, whatever top artists, because that'll happen too. Y'all go see these concerts, don't help you. You knew before. You ain't never heard of them going to go see nothing local, go no local live shows or nothing.
Yeah.
Just because you doing it, don't expect them to suddenly change.
Right.
It makes no sense.
Right.
Right? Your only reason why your expectation of them has changed because you're doing it.
Yeah.
That's not your audience.
Yeah.
Right? That's not your audience. So you can't get caught up in that, because that'll derail you.
Yeah.
There are people waiting for you. So don't do that. I'm all for that, because I had to struggle with that. Because when I first started doing stuff, all my folks came out, because it was, we all young. It's a cute thing to do.
Right.
As we all got older, they stopped coming.
Right.
I could be mad, but this isn't their thing.
Right.
We just got to a place where they had to start making decisions about where they spent their time.
Right.
And this ain't their thing.
Right.
The homies that this is their thing and they've always been those kind of folks still come out.
Yeah.
Everybody else lives their life.
Right.
I don't expect you. Only way I would expect you to ride with me is if I made enough. Like if we was Draking it, then I'd been like, then I expect all y'all, because I'm funding for all us to be here.
Right.
Then let's all be here. But if I ain't doing that, then everybody got to make their own way. And then the last thing is this is one thing that I'm learning late that I want to talk, is that to make sure that you just are tight with how you put things out.
Okay.
Right. And this is important. So when I say tight with how, because I'm a perfectionist and there's a lot of stuff I didn't do because I didn't feel like I had the resources to do it properly. And I hate that. Like what I really love is when I see folks who put stuff out that's not perfect, but they put it out perfectly.
Yeah.
With confidence, with intentionality, And I love it. And I see people respond to, even I respond to it. I'm like, yo, like, that's cool. Like, there are songs I've loved that weren't mixed well.
Yeah.
But I love the grittiness of it. And I'll defend it like, yo, y'all just don't understand how dope this is. Like, and then I realized we all do that. We all have these things that resonated with us for a particular reason that we love. We love discovering things.
Right.
We love finding stuff ain't nobody else know about. Like, we love that. And you can't just hold on and hold things. There are now, business wise, you want your business on point. You don't want to be messy with your business.
Right.
That's different.
Right.
Right. That's a totally different thing. But art wise, stop searching for perfection. It's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen folks, I saw a band put out a CD folded in paper, and they got cardstock, and the artwork was hand drawn, and they folded the CD up, and I saw them sell a bunch of them things at their shows.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the show, you want the CD.
Right.
Nobody's going over and looking at the packaging going, oh, this isn't professional. You just killed the show. They're just like, we want that. We want the t-shirt. They bind it up and they look at it and they're like, well, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Unwrap the thing and put the CD in.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of stuff, but it was imperfect, but it was done perfectly.
Right.
And so that was something I had to learn, because there's I sat on a lot of stuff that I just was like, I'd start and I'm like, I can't do it right. I can't put it out the way it needs to be put out. And I just sit on it.
Yeah.
Show it to a couple people, and never was a bad response. I just got self-conscious about it and embarrassed. And I'm like, no, that's just, don't ever do that.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think too, because it kind of plays into the concept of sometimes you get in your own head with stuff
Mm-hmm.
and you won't even start. Or even if you do start, then you'll stop. But it's just like you got to keep doing it and keep going and doing it with good intentions. You didn't say that, but that's why I'm interpreting what you're saying. Basically doing it with good intentions, because you're going to build and grow as you go. And
if you're creative, then this is the thing is, for me, it's like, if you're creative, then do it. Whatever you're gonna do it creative. If you can't do it professionally, do it creatively.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Because it's still gonna have an impression on people. So it's like, even if you make a mistake, make it on purpose.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, own it. And so if you can't do it professionally, you may not be able to afford to. At least do it creatively.
Yeah.
And it'll still do what it needs to do.
Yeah.
But like, you know, but that's something I wish someone had told me. So that's that fifth piece of life.
Yeah. I loved your course that you just gave. It was awesome and different. Yeah, I love that. So you said you just basically went over your syllabus for the course. What's the prerequisite before they come to your class in the morning?
Prerequisite before coming to class.
Yeah.
Man, it's so much. Because I'm a different individual. So prerequisite. All right, cool. So there's I'm gonna recommend a variety of things.
Okay.
From Where We Dream is a book. Robert Olin Butler, I think, is the author. Amazing book. It's a book about writing fiction, but I think anything about painting stories, because the beautiful thing about it that he did was he compares it to how we understand movies. And I think it was such a brilliant way, because everybody thinks they understand movies, and thinking about like how you tell a story and how you paint pictures and doing that, thinking about why we love movies, I thought it was mind blowing. Thelonious Monk, Coltrane and Monk are my two jazz go-tos. And I know everybody loves Thelonious Monk and John Coltrane, but there's, it's funny, I was listening to Rakim talk about how jazz influenced how he writes rhymes. Because if you see an interview, you'll see him talking about putting 16 dots on a page because he knows there's 16 bars in a verse. And then he's looking at it as like, how many words can you fit in that line? And, you know, but I recently heard him do another interview and he got deeper into it. And he listened to jazz, and jazz improvisation, and the way that they would change and do and just all of the rhythms. And that's what he uses inspiration. So he's like, if I have this measure of music that I know I have, then what are all the things that I can do? Then the crazy thing is I had heard that there was a rumor that there's a song that and I can't remember which song it is, but I used to play it for my students. Can't remember it right now, but there's not a 2-bar pattern repeated in the song. And I've listened to it a number of times, and I could hear subtle changes. But I listened to this interview, and he's like, that was an intentional thing, because he was listening to a jazz record, and the jazz artist did not play the same sequence of notes the entire song. So he was like, I did that in a few records earlier in my career, was to not repeat a pattern. I have to change something. So that's my reason that's how I felt. Hip hop was my interest way into jazz.
Gotcha.
Because I love the musicianship. Gotcha. And I love live music anyway. So, but Monk and Coltrane are where I'd start. Rakim, KRS-One, Big Daddy Kane, Light, Latifah. I think that's a good. I can build a lot of connections. And if I add Cool G Rap in there, I can build a whole lot of connections from those artists all the way through in terms of the family tree. There's a lot of family trees, a lot of branches from those artists. So listening to them, those 5 or 6 is part of that prep. A lot of things and then I think lastly, painting wise, I really love abstract impressionism. Andre Brayton and the surrealists in French surrealism, the Surrealist Manifesto, like those kind of artistic movements I like. Especially surrealism and Andre Brayton. Like I thought it was just fascinating. And the fact that Brayton was like really he was a really like revolutionary. Like he spoke a lot of revolutionary rhetoric, but that there's an attempt to quiet the noise around you in order to get to the heart of your art and the truth of your art was his thing. It gets romanticized in a way that makes it about, state of being and, and drugs and what have you. But ultimately it was about quieting the noise and getting to the truth of your art. And so if I can get you to dive into that a little bit before we talk, we can go a lot of places.
Yeah.
We can go a lot of places.
Man, based off your prerequisites alone, I want to take that course. I mean, you already said it, but like we were breaking that down, it's like, that would be a dope course. I love it, man.
I'm a weirdo. And so
you're not. You're creative and you're different, but it's beautiful. You know what I'm saying? And it's a different approach. It's like, it has swag, it has style, it has flavor. I feel like I want to take the class. I mean, I want to go listen to the prerequisites and go and read the book and look at the paintings and then take the class,
Rakim in the same interview, and I think it's actually going to end up being, and it was so crazy is that it was recent. It's going to end up being on YouTube. So I think it was Grand Rapids Community College was just recently, and they had a talk between him and the co-writer for his book, Don't Sweat the Technique. They went in conversation, and he says something else that always resonated with me because when like I said, I was a hyperactive, like all over the place kid, and he was talking about when he got knowledge of self, and he was like. He was really hesitant. He was stuck because he didn't know what to do in terms of writing rhymes because he didn't want to use Islam and he didn't want to use that knowledge. He wasn't going to put mathematics in his rhyme. Like he didn't want to use that as a vehicle for his music career. He felt like that would be the wrong thing to do. And he said what happened was he, much like what's happened in my life, I had a similar experience he was talking to some OGs, and he was like, what he came to gain from that was that it's not about regurgitating. What he could put was his understanding. So it's like you learn it, comprehend it. What ends up going into your art is your understanding, and that's okay. He was like, that's how he reconciled that. What I'm putting into my art is I'm not using that as a vehicle to make my art hot. I'm not. That's not the transaction. What's going into this art is my understanding. So I'm giving you what I understand from what I've learned, what I've comprehended, and what I'm taking from what I'm learning. That's what I'm giving you. And so I say all that to say is that that's what curiosity is for me. Like I can't quote, there are scholars and there are writers who can just start quoting stuff. I'm probably not going to quote too much to you, but I can tell you what I learned from whatever I read. Like me and someone else might read the book. They can quote passages from the book. I'm going to be able to tell you what the book taught me. And there have been people who've helped me be okay with that. That it's my own way. Why I brought that up is that all the things I just said are from that journey, and having OGs who helped me understand that freed me up to build my toolkit in a way that was particular to me. And I didn't have to build it like anyone else. Right. Because I don't think I'd have been here. I got here if I had to build it that way. Right. We all have to come to an honest understanding of who we are. And rigidity is not something I'm for. Yeah. So I enter into rigid spaces when I figured out a way for me to exist inside of it. If I haven't, I don't go into it. I'm only able to move in certain spaces because I've been given the freedom and the affirmation to equip myself well enough to be able to maneuver. And then once again, every opportunity, I don't leave with experience, I leave with a new skill. And so that's how I've built this. Yeah. And I wanted to say that because there are a lot of folks struggling because they aren't intelligent or smart or whatever in the way that people expect. But that doesn't mean that you're not brilliant. Right. It's just that you haven't been able to figure out the thing that makes you brilliant. Right. So that you can own it and use it at your disposal as you move forward. Right. And, my goal is to help make sure that happens for folks a lot younger than it happened for me. I was in California at this summit. It was a social justice summit. They asked me to do a piece, and I did a piece. And I was so self-conscious about it because it didn't say all the political things. And I sat down beside one of the elders, union organizer, and he was looking at me like, "You all right?" He was like, "It was great. It was great." And I'm like, I don't know if it was right because I was so self-conscious about the room full of people, activists, organizers from all over the country. And I just felt inadequate. He was like, "No, that was perfect." And what he told me he was like, the politics were present in the poem. Like the politics weren't the point of the poem, but they were present in the poem. And so in that moment, I understood what Rakim was saying. Like, if I've learned the lessons y'all are teaching me, then that is a part of every piece I write. So me having to write a piece that say the things, I don't have to write a piece that says the things. I just need to address whatever I'm addressing. And what y'all have taught me is going to be a part of my perspective. And so when that happened, everything about the way that I approach my art and create and move and navigate, everything shifted. I just needed someone to be like, nah, it doesn't have to be a way. Right. Yeah. You figure out what all of this means to you and give us that. Right. And those of us who get it will see it when we see it. Right. And I was like, that's all I need. Yeah. I think that's a very beautiful way of ending the show. And it made me think about a J. Cole line. What was that song? I'm about to blow up. It was on the warm up. And he says, be you, that's when it sounds beautiful, but I think that's important for people to know, like, your voice is what makes you beautiful. Your voice is what makes you unique, and even though it's different from other people, it doesn't mean that they don't understand what you're saying, because they do. They be trying to play games, but they understand what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I've really enjoyed all of this knowledge
that you dropped today, and you're an educator, so
Mhm.
it was kind of different, and I feel like I just was a student of you today, and
Thank
I want to
you.
continue to follow your curriculum. I like it.
Mhm.
Yeah. But tell the people how they can get in contact with you.
So all you got to do is look up Dasan Ahanu, DASANAHANU, Dasan Ahanu on everything, DasanAhanu.com, DasanAhanuStore.com if you want to buy any merch or anything like that, and Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, IG is all Dasan Ahanu. I'm the only person with that full name, so as long as you put that in, it's gonna be me. If you find somebody picture come up that don't look like me, hit me up and tell me, because somebody playing, because I'm the only person with that name.
Yeah. I appreciate you, brother, for coming on the show. I really do. I'm glad we got to have our moment to connect and understand one another more. I know I was listening to you more, but I really appreciate it, and I learned a lot from you being here. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and end the show. I'm your host, Patricia Schuler. I want to give a shout out to these mugs right here. I need some nice mugs.
Man, I was peeping this mug. Yeah.
My buddy Jazz made these mugs. We've been best friends since 3rd grade. And her site is Akayla Rose. So follow her on Instagram and hit her up if you need a mug, or she made me a keychain. She can do t-shirts. She out here. She a hustler. She do it all. So shout out to Jazz. But I guess I'm Patricia Schuler, and thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.